Good afternoon, everyone. So, as Jonathan mentioned, we're going to talk today about protecting and implementing your brand in the digital age. We're both going to do a little bit of talking between the two of us, so we'll sort of swap in and out. So I think the first thing just to point out really is, and there's a strap line here that says we don't design brands, we help build them. And really, to set the scene for you guys, we're not going to talk about designing brands, we're not talking about branding, we're talking about what happens after that stage. So, you know, most of you may have been involved or have been involved in, you know, sort of relentlessly getting brands ready. You know, you're spending the time, the money, the effort. You know, you're working with agencies, you're working with internal teams to craft the brand that you want and that's really going to resonate with your audience and work for your organisation. You know, that comes down to, you know, the look and feel, that comes down to the colours, that comes down to the fonts, and all those sort of key components that go into that, which is key. But I think often people don't realise actually what their brand assets are. You know, when we say brand assets, people immediately think logos, colours, fonts, things like that. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes with that. And I think some of the stuff we want to hopefully talk to you guys about today is just to give you a view of how we see that and how we can help that. So, you know, I think today, in a nutshell, is going to be about how do you make sure that that brand you've created, you can continually implement across your organisation and everyone that sort of gets involved in that brand. And also, I think, work on and talk about some of those channels that are now available. There's so many of them. How do you could do that consistently? So I think historically, brand management's been very much about brand guidelines. So everyone creates a brand. The first thing they do is create some guidelines to protect that. So it'll have font usage, tone of voice, what you can do with images, what you can and can't do. I think the challenge with that and what we often see is that guidelines by their very name are just guidelines. They're very open to abuse. They're very easy to interpret, but actually you can't necessarily control your brand in that way, because what you tend to find again is that it becomes very controlled by the marketing, the brand teams, which is great. There needs to be that control in place to make sure everything's on brand, but it becomes very labour intensive then. You know, constantly you're becoming the brand police. Everyone's looking over their shoulder when they're working with the brand to see whether they're making mistakes. Oh, can we do that? Can we not do that? The brand and marketing teams are just inundated with huge amounts of requests for it. And actually, I think one of the most important things we find is it then doesn't empower the rest of the organisation to actually confidently use the brand, which for us is really a key thing. Potentially in an organisation where you have multiple branches, multiple people, you know, you really want everyone to feel confident and comfortable in the brand that's been created and the time investment that's been there. And I think also often overlooked about brand management is everyone looks at it and thinks about it externally. So they look at it and say, how do our customers feel? How do people that interact with the brand externally feel? But actually it's also about how everyone feels internally about the brand. You know, you want everyone to feel empowered about using the brand and working with it and feeling comfortable in doing that. So I think some of the areas, you know, we look at and often, you know, just to set the scene a little bit more is that the world of work is obviously changing very rapidly. You know, things like remote working, great concept. You know, we agree with it and we actively do it. But I think that can often make it quite difficult because people become quite disparate in where they are. They're not listening to all the brand conversations going on. They don't necessarily understand everything. So it's a great principle and it's really worth having, but you have to have the processes and platforms and tools and stuff in place to make sure that brand conversation is equally received by everyone in the organisation. You know, I think again, availability of that brand, and we're talking both, you know, about the brand and the people. You know, we're all quite stretched most of the time. And again, I'm not saying 24/7 is a good way of working because it really isn't, but often there is that requirement. And, you know, if you're working internationally or there's split shifts, all that sort of stuff, you need to make sure that brand is always available so people can interact with it, they can use it, they can work with it. And I think probably the other key area is about speed to market. You know, the turnaround time when we're talking about creation of new assets, we're talking about being able to get hold of those assets. That speed to market is becoming, you know, very, very important. And the faster turnaround times are expected by everyone. You know, we all live in that world where I want it, I just want it now. It's exactly the same with brand and brand assets and materials and all that sort of stuff. So it's a really, really big challenge. You know, and this is just something from a study, and I just thought I'd bring it up. And this is about requests for new brand materials within organisations. So you imagine someone out there wants some new brand materials. Maybe they want to localise a poster, so they need to change an image on a poster. Historically, you'll find that then goes to the marketing team or the brand team. They then have to process that request. There's briefing, there's toing and froing, there's all this stuff to get that created. And you'll find majority of the time, it takes between a week and a month before that new brand asset is actually available to use, which in this day and age is just way too long. But it is the main way that happens. And it's not the fault of the designers or the brand teams or anyone, it's just the constant flow of that, and it's the challenge in using that. I mean, you see from the stats there is some that a day, and you know, there is the ability to do that if you've got the right processes in place. And I think, why is that so important, and why is the consistency of brand usage across all the areas so important? And I'm just going to give you some examples of things that we've bumped into working in the not-for-profit sector. So confusion in the market, that's a big one. And to give you an idea of that, we were working with a charity brand, and they were looking at a rebrand, and the first thing they thought was, let's have a look at how our current brand is perceived. When they went out and did an audit, they found they had 148 different versions of their logo. Different colours, different fonts, different strap lines, different taglines. Now, that had built up over a lot of time, but what actually that did was the confusion for anyone bumping into that logo. There's different colours. Is that a different branch? I don't understand that. So, you know, when they then went to spend all this money and time on a rebrand, what's the most important thing? We lock it down and we make sure that it's used in the correct way. Credibility, it's a huge issue. As soon as you've lost some credibility around your brand, potentially in the press or something like that, it's very hard to recover. And again, to give you an idea of a real life example, we were working with another brand, and they had brand ambassadors, and they were using them for the imagery. One of those brand ambassadors came under some negative press. They had no way of controlling those images that were already available within their network of branches. So people were still putting to print the image of this particular individual, and it was still there. And in the press, there's a lot of negativity. You're still using that in brand ambassador. Think about the damage and the credibility that actually can have. And then I think from an employee perspective, you know, I've just cited an example of where it might be quite embarrassing. How you're going to explain that your brand is associated with this? Well, you can't. But also in terms of morale, one of the things we see more than anything is that, you know, in a marketing team or a brand team, and we've seen this, and it's a very common thing. Perhaps you've got a marketing exec or a creative person. They come in, you know, they spent all that time coming into that career, wanting to do what they want to do, and actually, because there's no processes in place to manage this stuff, they become just an administrator. They spend their time picking and packing stock and merchandise out of the storeroom. That's what they do, because there's no efficient process in place. So someone that wants to come into a marketing environment, wants to do that, becomes an administrator. You're not going to keep those good people, and also, you know, from a morale perspective, it's going to be a challenge. You know, and building on that, and this is probably one of the big things, is cost and resource and time. That's ultimately, you know, what we're all striving to save and improve. Again, you know, particularly we see it with designers. You know, designers who work on the brand, they design things, they're creatives, spend their time just being an art worker again, because all they're doing is swapping a logo in and out. All they're doing is changing some images. Well, you know, if you've got a whole organisation that can work on the brand and can use the brand, that person can then focus on doing what their role is. You're not going to replace them. They don't need to lose their job over it. They now can focus on what their real role is, which is designing for the brand and progressing the brand and working on those sorts of things. So, you know, these are some of the things that we're going to address today. These are some of the areas and looking at that. And I think I'm going to hand over to Marcel now, who's going to build on some of these challenges and give you some more sort of insight and depth into the sorts of things that we face.
Afternoon, everyone. So as Stuart said, he's given you an overview of kind of the challenges. I'm going to actually drill down into some that we come across quite frequently, because I think we're working within the not-for-profit sector. There's some common grounds with some of the things that hopefully will resonate with you guys here today. The first one is, I think we're all very time poor. This is a kind of indicative of what we deal with on a daily basis. So we're getting more and more pressure to do things in less time. Our work-life balance, the kind of the blurring of the lines is ever more present. You know, that train journey into work, the train journey home, all of those areas, we're having to do more and a lot less with what we've got. So, you know, that notifications of those pinging up every day probably resonates with all you guys. It's also that the workload that we're doing increases in that, is increasing as well. So not only we've got less time to do it, but we've also got more to do in that time. And that work-life balance, again, is getting squeezed even further. Often, our roles have also changed and amalgamated. So what was traditionally the brand manager, the creative director, account managers, finance, we're tending to wear a lot of multiple hats. So we're being asked to do different things within the roles that we actually are doing anyway. So we've got time, we're reduced in time, we're asked to do more, and we've also got to learn how to do other things. So related to the brand, this is putting a huge amount of pressure on what we've got to do and how we can apply it. Channels. The channels that we also have to look at, so where our brand features and across what platforms, again, on a daily basis, that's increasing. So the social medias, the Twitters, the Pinterest, all of these things that probably didn't exist 5 years ago, we have now got to find stuff that the brand can support in terms of formats, content, and again, we're probably not specialists in the field of these, so we're being asked to do roles that are probably a little bit outside of our comfort zone. But yet, we still have to provide this sort of content, and these are just some of the examples that you might find. So how do you do that? Well, you've got different, got PDF outputs, you've got EPSs. How do you control what goes in to what channel, and to make sure that it's the right output and it looks all on brand and it sits within the rest of the look and feel? And something that I think is quite prevalent particularly in this sector, is localization. So we're all being told about personalization and localization and how that benefits us in numbers of ways. So from fundraising to events, it's a much more personal, you get more engagement. So we have gone from the national level down through to the branches or to volunteers. So the content for each of these channels is not only on a national scale, it's local as well. So we've got to think about the localized content. We've got to get that content, we've got to get the output, the correct channel to go in. That's a big ask for anybody, let alone somebody who's putting 3 or 4 different hats on. So we are bombarded by all these new channels. So we've got our message, we've got the channels, we've got the localization, we know what we want to say. We've got through that first hurdle. So the brand's on brand, it looks good. We've got to make sure, first and foremost, colour. So what does that actually mean? Well, colour can be anything. So colour can be making sure that it's the correct purple on a sign. It can be making sure that it's the correct tint value. Does it replicate across printed formats on web? So you've got all these different outputs. They don't all carry the same value. Do we all know what the colour values are of our brand guidelines? Do we know what core values they are? The breakdowns for when it should be used for a printed piece, when it should be used for social media? Probably not. It's a big requirement to know that. Logo positioning, just some fundamentals really around your brand. Where does it sit? How does it look across the social media banner versus on a 12-page newsletter, for example? And what impact does that have if we use a local brand? So the logo might change. We work with many organisations that have localised branding underneath their main brand. So does that work within that particular channel? So consider, does something with as I've got a great long name, I can use this, but does that fit in within the space defined within your media banner? So think about that sort of the logo positioning. And the output specification, this is an area that's really, really overlooked. There's an expectation that the brand's created, the assets are there, and it somehow just morphs into where it's supposed to be and at the right time. It looks great and everybody's happy. It doesn't just happen by chance. Somewhere along the line, and within the brand guidelines, and again, as Stuart touched on earlier, as guidelines, there are specifications around what paper should we use. We want it to be consistent. So whether we're putting something out in the north, south, doesn't really matter. Do we want it on an uncoated? Is it glossy? Is it shiny? What are the specifications around all of the assets that we've got within our brand? Signage, does it need to go on a certain material? So these are big considerations, that assumptions are made that this is already in place and that people know what they're doing. And we come across this time and time again, and this is really key for us, so this area here. Budgets. We all know budgets are stretched. We're being asked to do more. They're often being redistributed or even reduced, but the expectation is that we're going to still put out more or the same, if not more, with the funds that we've got. And output is going down on that. So by looking at controlling and implementing your brand, you can try and refine the areas where it's being used. I'll give you an example of an organisation we deal with where they have a central resource for marketing and communications. So their design team are there to facilitate the wider organisation. they will tell you the amount of requests that come in for, could you just put that colour or that, change the logo into that one for me so I can put it on my Facebook channel? Could you just put that as a PDF? Can I have that as a... Now those requests, while they might be 5-10 minutes, they soon mount up, but they're never captured as a cost. But the amount of time that your creative team, directors, marketing team, are spending dealing with things that actually would be best pushed back to your users, because ultimately if you can control that traffic, and you're also extending that resource, because your design team, if you've got branches or you've got out workers or volunteers, are never going to be able to put that throughput through a central channel. So by empowering this back to your users, you're controlling the budgets, you're reducing any overspends or wastage from people not doing what they're there to do. So a really important one to look at. This is always a really boring one, hence why I put the Z's at the top. So if you're not asleep already, you might be in a minute. Security, it's one that's really overlooked. Obviously last year was the big thing around the GDPR, so compliance issues and all of those, so you'll be aware of the impact of that. But your assets, the things that you prize as a brand so highly, do you know where they are? Do you know where they're stored? Are they safe? What would happen if you couldn't get hold of them? Those questions around, what would happen if that server went down? Can we access them? Is there a sort of disaster recovery in place to make sure that we've got that backed up? God forbid all those assets went down, we'd be lost without them. So just consider the security aspect of where they're housed, they're accessible, all of those things. Because I think it's something that, whilst they're not the nicest thing to talk about, it's a really important part. I'm going to pass back to Stuart to give you some of those. So I've given you some of the challenges around that we see and how we think brand management can help solve some of those things that we've highlighted. So I'll pass back to Stuart for you.
Thanks, Marcel. Cheers. Thank you. So I think what we've obviously done is hopefully set the scene, and I'm sure some of these things that we've talked about resonate with some of you guys, and you know, these will be challenges that you face on a daily basis. I think now what we're going to introduce is just from a strategy perspective, and you may already have some of these components in place, which is great. If any of you have got the entire solution we're about to talk about in place, well, that's fantastic. That's even better. But hopefully there'll be a few things on here that we can talk about. So I think, you know, to start with, and talking about a brand management solution, technology is quite key here, obviously. There's a lot of technology available, but really one of the cornerstones of being able to implement your brand effectively is going to be a piece of technology, a brand management platform. Now, you know, to sort of introduce that concept a little bit more and talk about the solutions around that, you know, wouldn't it be amazing if you could have a solution that automated a lot of the processes that we've talked about, some of those challenges, some of those things. How the brand guidelines can transform into control, but control digitally and control centrally, but saving an awful lot of time. And ultimately, the conversation I talked about before about actually empowering your organisation and the other people within your organisation to use the brand. You imagine if there's one designer, that output is limited to their capacity. If you've got another 50 to 100 people, or 5 people, 10 people, imagine the collective output if they're all able to use the brand effectively and confidently and create new materials, like Marcel was talking about localisation. And then on the back of that, technology enables us to do an amazing thing, which is report on that. So who's logging in? Who's using the brand? What assets are they using? What parts of the brand are they interacting with the most? What that enables you to do centrally is then refine the creation of your brand assets. You're creating stuff that actually is needed. You know, if you find you create a load of documents that everyone wanted and then one person used it, you've wasted a whole bunch of time. Whereas what you can do with the usage and the statistics is actually make sure the materials that are being created, the materials that are being ordered, you can continue to refine those and improve those. And that's a really, really key thing. And ultimately, as we've talked about a lot, and you'll hear us keep talking about it, it's about saving time and money. And that's what technology used in the right way around the brand will enable you to do. And I think just touching on some of the really key parts to it and the key areas to think about when you're looking at the technology is about brand control. So we've talked a lot about empowering other people to use the brand, and there's always this conversation. Everyone suddenly goes, oh, I'm a bit uncomfortable about that. You're saying that other people can control it. It's outside of marketing, it's outside of brand, and everyone gets a bit concerned. But when we talk about that, what we're actually saying is, yeah, give a control out to people, but it's a moderated control. So technology allows you to create groups, create teams, create departments, then those departments and teams can access the brand assets that they need. They might not have the ability to create an entire document, they just have the ability to customize certain parts based on an agreed suite of images or some agreed strap lines. So you're empowering them enough, but you're not letting them go off-piste and ending up with 148 versions of your logo. So you're controlling it at that level. And I think also internal management of that is key, but also you're probably going to be working with a lot of external providers as well, you know, publication providers, other agencies, things like that, and allowing them access to your brand on a very limited basis. You might only share with them one asset. Oh, we've got an ad coming out, we need a logo. Well, here's a time expired link from our brand asset management system that you can go and download that logo in the right format. That sort of stuff just speeds up the whole process because you're not having to sift through files. Where's that logo? Or is that the EPS? Is that? It's all there. It's all really simple to use. And I think one of the most powerful parts of brand control and technology that is here is templating and templating platforms. So you'll all probably be aware of things like web to print. Web to print's been around for a very long time. But really where it takes it to the next level is about what we call web to publish. So the ability not just to create an artwork to be printed, but create any type of artwork you want. So you can template a Facebook post. You can lock it down so they can't touch logo, they can't touch background image. All they can change is maybe a contact phone number, whatever that might be. So again, you're getting that really granular control over the brand, but you're allowing people to use it themselves. So they're not bugging you going, oh, well, I saw that post you put out on the main account. I just need a localized version. Well, okay, go on and create it yourself. And I think, again, giving you that control, everything can go through approval workflows. So if you do allow someone to create a new localized poster and they want to print 10 of them to go and use somewhere, that can ping back to the marketing team. They process it, they want to print 10, goes back to the marketing team, approval. You check it over, spellings, image usage, all that stuff. Happy with that, it then goes through the process. So you can use technology to drive that creative process, that localization process really, really effectively. And as I said, it's still control. You've still got control over it. Technology, again, gives you the ability to administrate that. So you've got a load of images. You've just had a photo shoot done for all your brand imagery. You want to put that somewhere. You guys, as the marketing team or the brand leader, whatever, can go in and upload those. You don't need agencies to do that for you or create another thing. It's there. It's a living, breathing tool that you can work with. And I think, again, the real brilliance behind technology is that everything can be integrated, or it should be able to be integrated. There is systems that you can't, but in general, these things can work together. So, you know, things like if you've already got an image library, you can connect that up to your brand management platform. So when they are creating a poster, they can just ping out, get the image from your current image library, go back in again. You know, another thing, everyone hates having a million usernames and passwords, but we all do, but it's something that shouldn't be there anymore. Things like single sign-on. If you've got other tools that you're using, you can work it so that you single sign-on into these platforms, so it's not another task, another chore. So you can make this really, really accessible and really, really easy. Next one, asset storage and distribution. Question to ask, does anyone know where all their brand assets are? Some people do, some people don't, most people don't. Probably a Dropbox somewhere, maybe a Google Drive, maybe a marketing server, maybe a local computer. These are the things we see. People are like, yeah, I know all my assets are, and then they're sort of in these buckets for all different bits and pieces everywhere, which does work to a degree, but where we're talking about really is a home for everything. So everything can live somewhere online in the cloud, but not just a glorified structure like Google Drive where it's just a dumping ground for all these random things. What you can do with a brand management platform is you can strategically categorize things, strategically tag things. You know, technology allows you to do things like upload a bunch of images, and then the system itself will read the image, and it will then tag it appropriately with the keywords. So you don't have to put all those in yourself, it'll do it for you. You can create different groupings and different categories for different people. So for instance, you create a bunch of assets, they're all different things. There's posters, leaflets, Facebook stuff, all that sort of stuff, and you want to group those into a category, let's call it a summer campaign you're doing. You can do that in the system, and then people can just access everything available for that summer campaign. So they're not bombarding you with, oh, what are we doing with this? What can I get access to? It's all there. It's all easy to use. And as I've talked about, the grouping allows you to personalize that access so people have as much or as little as you want them to. So it can become a really, really key thing to do. I talked about it earlier, but 24/7 availability. Someone wants to do some branding work on a Saturday afternoon, let's say that's an example. Historically, they've got to email the design team or the marketing team, oh, I need this image, I'm trying to, well, they're not going to get a response necessarily till Monday. Well, actually, they can go on, create the artwork, download it on the Saturday, it's good to go. So that slide I showed you earlier of how long it takes you to get a customized piece of artwork, 1 week to 1 month, actually you can get it within 10 minutes. So it speeds up that entire process. Talking back to things like the brand ambassador issue with images in there. So you centrally retract a load of images from the system can tell everyone that that image has now been replaced or removed. So it notifies people of, oh, we know you've downloaded this asset, by the way, we had to retract that. Notifications, push notifications, things like that. So you can drive that and make sure it's always up-to-date artworks they're using, always up-to-date imagery that they're consuming. So you don't end up with that situation we talked about before. And I've already talked briefly, but visibility and tracking. So, you know, it gives you that ability to refine the process. And you can get very, again, the beauty of technology is it can be very, well, it can be very big brother, but you can see who's logging in, when they're logging in, what they're doing, what assets they're downloading, what variants of that asset. Is it a JPEG? Is it a PNG? What are they doing with those assets? So you instantly have that visibility centrally. So we don't get into that situation of, you know, the brand police looking over your shoulder of what people are using it for. It's there, it's transparent, and you can refine and move on with the brand from that. And I think probably a really important part to talk about now is that brand management and the brand management solution isn't purely about the technology. It's part of it, and it's a very key part to it. But as Marcel's already talked about briefly, there's a piece beyond that. So you've created some artwork, you want to print it, you want to get the posters done, you want to produce that. How does that then work? You've got merchandise, you've got promotional items, maybe you've got signage, you've got all those different assets that are now created. How do you then actually get those to work? How do you get, historically, again, people create them and then they go and source a printer. They go and find a printer to print it. And this is where we get specification issues because you don't know the specification, so you end up with all this random stuff. You've got different people ordering from different places. So one of the things we work with organisations like yourselves on a lot is about centralising that so that you know when stuff is going to get produced, it's going to get produced in the right way. So it's going to get produced on brand, it's going to be on the right stock, it's going to be at some agreed pricing, so you know the pricing's accurate. Because one of the things we also see a lot is where you've got decentralised ordering, someone orders a poster and they pay X for it, someone else orders a poster and they pay 4 times for it. So suddenly that budget is not controlled anymore. Suddenly it's a waste of money because it's not being centrally procured or centrally managed. And I think some of the other areas that we've bumped into, which again can be part of your brand management solution, is things around merchandise, clothing, promotional goods, all that sort of stuff. Again, often we find charities and not-for-profit are storing that in a cupboard somewhere. They don't know how much they've got. They just sort of know there's a couple of boxes left and when it runs out, I'll worry about it then. Someone then has to add it onto their job to fulfill. It takes ages to get stuff out. People that require this stuff for events or different campaigns can't get hold of it. Well, actually, if you centralise that on a platform, imagine a situation where someone's come in to create some posters, they've created those, they want those printed, they then decide that they need some merchandise as well at the same time, they create a basket, they check out, everything's printed and dispatched centrally within a couple of days. Pricing's right, specifications there, everything works. And these are the sorts of things a brand management platform can do for your organisation. And these are the sorts of things where you can save a lot of time, a lot of effort and a lot of money. There's no back and forwards on briefs, there's no back and forwards with printer procuring quotes, it's just all there and easy. You know, things like stock management. When a stock item gets low, the stock system will tell you that you need to order some more. So you never run out, it's always available. You can make sure the people that are using the brand can always access that. And again, coming down to that variable templates and talking a little bit more about that. And depending on whether you've used a variable templating system, people often don't realise the power of what you can do with that. So, you know, there's good examples and bad examples. Things like posters, you know, it's really easy to create a poster artwork, allow people to upload images, allow people to change strap lines, all that sort of stuff. But you can take that further. Maybe there's newsletters, so they want to sort of create some different page layouts, and they want to choose from some agreed layouts and then print those locally as well. So it's pretty much anything that could be produced. As I touched on before, no one ever knows what the right Facebook post sizes are. They change all the time. No one ever knows what that you create a template, everyone starts using that template. They can change the images, change the text, but it's on brand and it outputs in the right format. And that works across the whole area. And then things like, as I talked about, the fulfillment aspect, working on a brand management solution, you can have those things like SLAs in place, to make sure that when someone orders something, they know they're going to get it in 2 days. Again, it's all brand reputation management internally and externally. If someone requests or wants to get some artwork and it takes a week, there's a bit of a negativity to that. If it's instantaneous and they get it produced and it's printed and it's shipped, again, one of the biggest areas something like this can do is save everyone a lot of time. Can be really, really key. This is a really interesting case as well. Marketing versus finance. That's like an eternal battle about, have you got the purchase order? Where's the invoice? We didn't get the invoice, you never sent it through, and there becomes this, no one knows what they've spent, budgets get out of hand, finance get cross, marketing don't know what to do with it, it's a problem. If you centralise all of those processes, ordering, finance, you can really make that process very, very easy. So imagine you've got a number of different people accessing the system. They can have a shared budget. They could have individual budgets. That budget could be based on a certain tier, and if they go over that budget, they've got to go to the marketing director for authorisation. That can all be handled via the technology and the platforms and the solutions. So you're in that situation where it's very, very controlled. You imagine you create those artworks, you order some posters, it's printed, automated invoice directly to accounts. Saves everyone a load of time. Even the ability for accounts to log in and then download those reports. So, there's been loads of orders happening, people have been getting posters, leaflets, all of that sort of stuff. They can go in and download those sales orders, put them into the accounts, it's all reconciled. Even things like, if you are holding stock, that stock has a value. If you've bought that stock, i.e. promotional merchandise, that has a financial value that you have to account for as part of your accounts process. If that's on the system, accounts go in and they get the live stock values, they know what's on hand, it becomes a thing of the past. And it doesn't become that constant sort of battle and challenge that's there. And again, we're back to this again, but just to wrap up on time, resource and cost efficiencies on that process, if you get this right in terms of how that brand management solution fits within the organisation, you will save a bunch of time on things like artwork requests. You save a load of money on things like image duplication. I see it all the time. If you've got really good images, you've purchased them or you've paid someone to take them, then you find you've got a load of images, but no one's using them. People are just buying more from other stock sources or procuring other photographers. Well, if you actually make that image library work for you, you get a lot more value out of those images that you've already got. And talked about it before again, is things like print pricing. It's one of the biggest, we still see in the not-for-profit sector, it's one of the biggest marketing spends is print, because it's still costly, but it's still very valuable. And what we find is that generally where lots of people are ordering from lots of different people, there is no control over that. And it's all retrospective. Oh, you paid 4 times as much. Well, yeah, we did, but it's already done now, so I can't do anything about it. But those agreed print pricing, those economies of scale that you'll drive from that, that's all part of the brand management process. As Marcel talked about earlier, when we talk about brand management, no one thinks about, do we put that on a 120 gram weight paper or 150? Or do we laminate that? What do we do? All of those things affect brand and affect cost. So making sure that you've got that controlled can really make a big, big difference. What I'm going to do now is, rather than us keep talking about this sort of stuff, I'm actually going to show you a case study video, which is a live organisation. So the Scouts decided to rebrand for the first time last year in 19 years. They've got 16,000 Scout groups in the UK who all needed to implement this new brand pretty much overnight. So this is going to take you through the process, how they did that, how it works, so you can get a bit of a real life example.
Believe it or not, it's been 17 years since the last Scout rebrand. So the world had changed, society had changed, and we realised the Scouts had to change with it. We are in a digital age now, so our brand had to be fit for digital. We knew our brand had to reproduce better in print. We also knew that we had to reflect the benefits of Scouting much more in our brand. Brand IQ has been a great tool for the Scouts. It's helped deliver some great local print solutions and digital solutions to support Scouting right across the UK, and it's been absolutely critical in the delivery of our new brand. So we have 160,000 adult volunteers, and they're in every part of the UK. All of those are doing Scouting as part of their spare time activities, so it's all kind of non-work related, and what we want to do is make sure that their volunteering is the sort of volunteering that they want to do. So what Brand IQ does is takes out the hard work for them. So they can concentrate on delivering and planning activities. They can come back to Brand IQ and create a poster, a flyer, a sticker incredibly easily without the need for any software experience or knowledge, without the need for any expensive equipment. They can produce that poster just very, very quickly and very inexpensively. So it's an invaluable service. So when we were implementing our new brand, we knew that it had to be flexible enough to work for Scouting at a local level and also a national level. So we have counties, we've got districts, we've got groups in Scouting. We've also got different Scouting nations. What we did was devise a colour system so that each nation had its own particular colour, which gave it distinctiveness, but it was within a recognisable and unified family as well. The advantage of Brand IQ was that it allowed Scouts in those nations and in those counties and districts to bring up their resources, and the brand was already there for them in the right colour, within the template. They didn't have to do any work, and all they had to do was just personalise the materials. So it was an incredibly valuable service, an incredibly valuable tool when implementing the brand at a local level. Whereas before we had to produce a really wide range of templates for every conceivable task or job in Scouting, whether it's a job advert, a fundraising poster, a car wash leaflet. We now offer a template, or several templates, which are completely flexible. So we've moved to a self-service system where members can change the headers, the body copy, even the image. And we've got a library of 100 fantastic on-brand images that are on the library that people can pick and choose from and import into their templates. So it's a powerful sort of suite of resources that combine together to produce something really, really great for the local volunteer. The launch of our new brand really wouldn't have been the same without the support of the Brand IQ team. Thinking in particular of the first few days, which were incredibly busy for us. The Brand IQ team were there whenever we needed them. So they were answering questions from our members, they were answering lots of questions from ourselves, and they were solving technical problems, but they were also helping our members find their way through the new system, getting our members registered, set up, until they were really comfortable to use the system on their own. And the great thing is, I think word of mouth goes out right across the movement about the quality of the materials on there, the service that we receive from the Brand IQ team. And I think the proof's in the pudding, really. We've got 15,000 users on the system, and that's just in the space of 6 months. There's always a need for really high quality print. And one of the great things about Brand IQ is that it offers not just that really sophisticated and reliable digital platform, but a really high standard of print. It's really important for the Scouts to have partners whose values align with their own. So when our members are working with Brand IQ and purchasing materials from them, we know that our reputation and trust is on the line. So if our partner isn't delivering, that means that our own reputation and trust suffers. That's never been the case with Brand IQ. They always offer that very high level of care and attention to our members. So we know and we're confident that Brand IQ delivers the same level of service as we do centrally here at the Scouts.
So moving forward, I feel that the Brand IQ platform will continue to support the Scouts in their ongoing rebrand and the implementation behind that. And we see ourselves very much as partners in this and making sure that we refine the processes and the concepts to ensure longevity for the new Scouts brand.
If you're looking for a brand management solution that isn't just a piece of software, then I really think Brand IQ is the right solution. It offers that great flexibility locally as well as that great control centrally, which I think is the secret to a really successful brand.
So just to kind of summarise what Chris was saying there, it's basically how we've helped, or brand management solutions help the Scouts particularly with they've got 180,000 volunteers across 16,000 sort of branches, if you like, and how they've had to deal with the challenges. So it's helped having a platform or solution in place for them to get to that. So I just want to touch quickly on, we've gone through the challenges, some solutions around that, and a little bit of a case study. Some of you might be sitting there thinking, well, it's quite interesting. Okay, how would you progress this further? And I think that's one of the key areas and questions that we get asked quite a lot is, where do we start? As an organisation, big, small, it doesn't, scalability, where do we start thinking, or how do we start thinking about it? And I think taking what we hear is an implement is listening to the organisation, absolutely critical. So no matter your intentions, good or otherwise, if you don't get buy-in and adoption from your organisation across all the departments, then no matter how good the platform system implementation is, it will not be adopted. So you have to consider that there are obviously different areas, different requirements, so from fundraising to HR, they'll all have a different vested interest in getting something out of the platform. And it's absolutely, I can't overstate how important this is to get groups together, go through that process, see what everybody wants from it, and then start that conversation. One of the great ways you can do that is look for somebody that looks supplier-wise, use the supplier, use them as a safe pair, an intermediary, if you like, so that they're there to facilitate those conversations. There may be friction between certain departments, that happens, but rather than try and challenge that internally, use a supplier as part of the scoping process to help you with this, facilitate those meaningful conversations to get to a place where you can actually say, well, do you know what, this is what we would like. How do we go about it and do it that way? So it's a really, really good way to do that. And that will give you some massive buy-in at an early stage, because the other side of looking at implementing this brand solution is that you don't want to kind of creep up on your users or people that are going to be using it. Give them some visibility early on. Make sure that they're part of that journey in whatever capacity that you can do, because obviously the higher the adoption, the greater the usage, the greater the brand, and how you use all those assets. So it has to be a collaborative thing. Quick one, Stuart mentioned earlier, templates. Designing for templates is not the same as designing for a printed piece. I speak from experience. We deal with organisations where it's a case of there's the artwork for this, just transpose it. It doesn't work as simply as that. So you have to considerations around co-partnering logos. Do you want different logos to go in alongside? So there's a whole raft of questions that are associated with that. So just bear that one in mind. It's not a simple case of migrating everything across. And that will be from layouts, where things are positioned on the page, how you would like the logos to appear, all those sorts of things. There is one example I like to use, which is an organisation that had a 64-page A4 template. So every single page had about 5 or 6 variables, so you could change images, update the text. Sounds amazing. Templating, you can pretty much template everything. But however, you have to give it some consideration. So whilst you can do it, I think that publication only got produced twice in 12 months. So they spent a great deal of time, resource, effort in creating it. And yes, you can create it, but actually it wasn't fit for purpose because the organisation didn't use it. So you have to give some consideration. So too much choice on templating isn't always great. So it's a balance. Onboarding, I know it's not a word that everybody likes or understands necessarily, but again, this whole, the training, the scoping, going through that session, this is not a quick win thing. This is a strategy that you have to, as I said, get collaborative input from your partners, internally, externally, so everybody feels like there is an objective and a goal at the end. So the onboarding pass, scoping, make sure you've got a provider that goes through that with you, helps you facilitate those conversations. Make sure that you've got all the areas that you wish covered comprehensively, because it's absolutely critical to the whole stage of all that. In terms of outputs of that will help sort of ward off some of those queries or questions that you may get at launch. So rather than going all the way through the process, getting to the launch, and then having those questions, try and evade that by doing it earlier on in the piece. So that's a great part. And you've deployed it. So great, success, fantastic. You've got it all launched. And one thing to say about the launch, if you're going to do this, make sure that there's some fanfare around it. Don't be shy. Make an event. Invite everybody along. You know, you should be proud of this. This has taken a lot of work and a lot of energy to get going, so make sure you're proud of it and do it. And then after that, the support is key, continued. So your supplier, make sure you've got regular review meetings. Make sure that there's development work in the pipeline. Make sure that they can do bespoke things for you. Not every organisation is the same. Large, small, you know, there is a mechanism and a platform that will work for everybody. So make sure it's working for your organisation. There is no point in having a look and adopting this if it's not going to be used. And again, you know, if there's ongoing training, support with the staff, you know, they'll help you with that as well. Scalability, one we always get asked very briefly, because I know I'm running out of time. So organisations say, well, we're not the size of, you know, some huge corporates. It makes no difference. If you have a need, most people have a brand asset need of some description, so make sure the provision is scalable. So if you start off small, you've got the main central office and a few branches or users, make sure that that can expand as you grow or reciprocally can scale. So make sure that provision within your provider exists as well. So that's us very quickly done.
Thank you very much.
That's fine.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.